Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video, and today guys we are going to be doing a unit review of the Malcador Infernus. So without further ado, let's just dive straight into this. Now the Malcador Infernus is a Forge World model. You will not find this in your Imperial Guard / Ashman the Tarm Codex or the Greater Good or any of the other supplements. This is found in the Imperial Armor books. Now the Malcador Infernus has been around for a long time. It's actually quite a venerable guard unit, and we've had it since about the time of the Siege of Rak. So it's fairly well established, it's fairly well known, and you shouldn't have any issues with using this model in a tournament or even in a casual setting, because like I said, it's a fairly well established model. So now we know where to find this model, let's take a look at its stats. So at the time of recording this video, it costs about 250 points. It has a 10-inch movement, weapon skill 6 plus, ballistic skill 4 plus, strength 7, toughness 8, 18 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7 and a 3 plus save. It comes with 2 heavy stubbers and its signature weapon, the Inferno Gun. Now the heavy stubbers have got the stats of 36-inch range, heavy 3, strength 4, AP dash, damage 1 essentially. We don't have like special heavy stubbers like the Mechanicus or anything like that. We've just got straight up heavy stubbers, and they're like firing 3 bolter shots. So you have 2 of those, and then you also get an Inferno Gun. Now the Inferno Gun is the main reason you're taking this thing. It's got an 18-inch range, which is quite a nice long range for a flamer type weapon. It's heavy 3d6, that's an average of 10.5 shots every time you fire it. It's strength 7, which is one of the more powerful flamers that I'm aware of. It's got AP -2, which is great for things like Armor of Contempt. It's also got damage 2, which is great for killing Marines as well. This is like an anti-Marine flamer. And each time an attack is made with this weapon, that attack automatically hits the target, just like many of the flamethrower type weapons. Essentially, this is one of the biggest flamethrowers that you can take in your Imperial Guard army, and the Inferno Gun is an absolutely fantastic weapon. Honestly, I don't really have any bad things to say about it. It's got high volume of fire, it's got good range, it's got decent strength, it's got good AP, it's got good damage, and it gets past one of the big problems that Guard has, which is poor ballistic skill. So overall, the Inferno Gun is a pretty strong weapon. Now you can swap out the 2 heavy stubbers it comes with, because they are a little bit piddly. You can swap them out with 2 autocannons, 2 heavy bolters, 2 heavy flamers, or 2 las cannons. Now any of those weapon options can be made to work, but in my opinion this is a close range flamer tank, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doubling down on that. And so for me it just feels right that if you've got an Inferno Gun, that you'd back that up with even more flamers. So taking 2 heavy flamers would certainly be my go-to option when it comes to taking this tank. However, there's kind of 2 things you want to consider. Firstly, if you put the flamers on it, obviously you're going to be doing more flamer damage. It all fits in with what you're trying to achieve this vehicle, which is great, but that is pricey. It is going to take the cost of the vehicle up to about 280 points. However, if you want to keep this thing cheap and you're thinking, well, at the end of the day, the Inferno Gun is the main selling point, anything after that is just whatever, then you could just keep it as cheap as possible. Just keep it with 2 heavy stubbers, keep it that sort of 250, 260 points, and be like, you know what? I'm taking it for the Inferno Gun. I don't really care about the side guns. Keeping it cheap, keeping it efficient. So that's a totally viable way of running this unit, and those are kind of the 2 ways that I would consider running it on the tabletop. Either all flame all the way, or as cheap as possible. Now you can also add a hunter killer missile to this unit, but I don't tend to find that you want to do that, simply because it's only got a ballistic skill of 4+. If you're going to take hunter killer missiles, you want to put them on things that are going to be hitting more than a 50-50 chance, because you only get to fire that hunter killer once. It's a one and done, right? So I tend to find you want to be putting hunter killers on your tank commanders, or maybe sentinels as strike first, strike hard, but outside of that, I'm not a big fan of them, to be honest. The only thing I would say in the defense of the hunter killer, and I appreciate it's a little bit of a tangent, is that it's quite good when you're building your guard armies now, because I tend to find I have sort of 10 to 15 points left over a lot of the time that I'm not sure what to spend the points on. This is a side effect of the fact that a lot of our points costs now are set. For example, it's 60 points for an infantry squad no matter what, it's 50 points for a heavy weapon squad no matter what, so on and so forth. So I do tend to find that I have 10 to 15 points left over in a lot of my lists, and so I do find that the hunter killer missile is starting to creep its way back in, but for me, that's kind of its role. I don't have it as a primary weapon since my mind. It's a little bit of an extra bonus with a few points left over. But side tangent over, let's get back to the Malcador. Long story short, we're not putting a hunter killer missile on this beast. Now you can also put a storm bolter or a heavy stubber on this vehicle, and for me personally, just going off gut instinct, rule of cool, just what feels right with the unit, I think I'd probably go with the heavy stubber every single time. I mean, at the end of the day, this is an older vehicle, it's from the Krieg sort of line, from Vrax and all that kind of stuff, and so Krieg love their stubbers, and so it just feels right. And whenever you see a Malcador trundling around the battlefield, you always seem to see a dude poking out the hatch with a stubber, not with a storm bolter. I'm not saying that for a tactical reason, I'm just going with what feels right for this unit. It's an old variant of an Imperial tank. It should probably have that older weapon system like the 50 cal. So for me, I quite like taking the heavy stubber. The storm bolter actually probably wouldn't necessarily be a bad choice, and from a tactical point of view, what I would say is if you're strapping 2 heavy flamers to this thing, you're going to be getting into a 12-inch range anyway. There's kind of no problem with sticking the storm bolter on as well. It's 4 extra shots. Chance you'll trigger some Hammer of the Emperor there. So not actually a bad choice. If you're going down the flamer route, I'd probably consider sticking that storm bolter on top. But if you're going down the budget route, but you want to give it a little bit more DACA, I wouldn't be against putting the extra heavy stubber on this thing. I mean, at the end of the day, if you go down the triple heavy stubber route, it really guarantees you're going to get at least 1/6, which is at least 1 Hammer of the Emperor, and that's not too bad. And with a bit of luck on your side, you might even find yourself getting like 2 or 3 Hammer of the Emperors off, and yeah, that's not bad at all considering it's only 265 points to take 3 heavy stubbers on this thing overall. So I think the storm bolter and the heavy stubber both have a place, but they're not essential upgrades. You can leave both at home if you want to, but they are kind of cool and not a bad choice at the end of the day. Now, I just want to briefly go over the datasheet abilities for this unit. So, the Malcador Infernus does benefit from Hour of Contempt, which means it's going to reduce all AP from incoming attacks by 1. That's shooting and close combat. So, if you get hit by an AP 1 attack, it becomes AP nothing. If you get hit by an AP 2 attack, it becomes AP 1, so on and so forth. It also has smoke launchers, which are really helpful. For those that don't know, Guard smoke launchers are quite a bit different to the ones that you'll find in 9th edition codexes. They're the old way of doing it, where you can only launch smoke from each vehicle once per game, but you can do it on more than one unit. So at the moment, for things like Marines, smoke launchers are a stratagem that you can do on one of your units. But with Guard, it's not a stratagem. It's a datasheet ability. So what you can do is you can drive all your Guard vehicles forward and then pop smoke with all of them if you want to. You wouldn't be able to shoot that turn, but it does mean that all of your vehicles would have an inbuilt -1 to hit. Now, this is quite a nice feature to have on a unit like the Malcador. It is an older tank, so you wouldn't necessarily expect it to have things like smoke launchers. For example, there are some units in the Guard that don't have smoke launchers, some vehicles that don't have them, so make sure you check before you assume that all Guard vehicles do. I don't think the Taurox has them, for example, but weirdly the Sentinel does, for example. But anyway, back to the Malcador Infernus. Why are smoke launchers quite a nice little perk for this tank? Well, quite simply, it's not got the longest range in the world. And so what you're going to find is that you're going to want to move it forward for a turn. But there's no point in just moving it forward turn 1 and just letting it sit there holding its dick in the wind. It's not going to have a great time. So why don't you move forward? You're not in range or anything. Pop smoke. More than likely, it'll help your Malcador survive the incoming fire that it's definitely going to draw. And then next turn, you should be able to move again, be in range, and be having a great time. So smoke launchers are actually a really nice perk for this vehicle. I have a lot of experience with using smoke launchers on flamer vehicles because I run a lot of flamer chimeras, and one of my favourite tactics is going aggressive with the chimeras against shooting armies and then just across the line popping smoke. It really messes up shooting armies days, and it's just a nice little trick that a lot of people don't expect to face anymore because people are so used to facing the newfangled stratagem-based smoke launchers. Now, like many vehicles in 40k, the Malcador can explode when it dies. Now, most vehicles, when they die on a 6+, they explode. But the Malcador explodes on a 4+, like the Hellhound. And when it goes up, oh boy, does it go up. So not only does it explode on a 4+, but it affects all units within 6 inches, not 3 inches like some vehicles. And it does D6 mortal wounds. That's right, not D3, D6. When that flame tank goes up, when the fuel for that Inferno Gun starts cooking, it takes out everyone around it. Now, just to be clear, and I've mentioned this a few times on like live streams when people have mentioned this to me, just because a unit explodes on a 4+ doesn't mean you should be wanting it to explode. Okay, the primary purpose of this thing is to go around burning things with its Inferno Gun. Just because it happens to be able to be doing some mortal wounds when it explodes doesn't mean that that's what you should be wanting it to do. At the end of the day, A Malcador Infernus that gets to the end of the game and has been able to burn 4 to 5 units is going to do more damage than a Malcador Infernus that maybe burns for once, maybe twice, and then explodes. So for me, it's kind of cool that it does some damage when it explodes, but it's not the main reason you should be looking at this datasheet at all. Of course, you're going to have to be very careful when you're deploying this thing. Make sure that you don't deploy it where the enemy can see it, because if they blow it up and it starts doing D6 mortal wounds to your army, you're going to start feeling that if you're all bunched up, because Guard tends to be a really big army on 2,000 point games of 40k, and this thing will probably be in range of multiple units. So whilst it can do a lot of damage when it goes up, make sure, it's best that it doesn't die and it burns the whole game, and make sure if it does, it's near the enemy and not you. That's just a very important thing to be aware of. Now, I know so far in this review we've been kind of glowing about the Malcador Infernus, but it does have a few disadvantages that you need to be aware of if you're going to consider including one of these things in your army. Now, the first one is its points cost. It is 260 points base with those 2 heavy stubbers that you're forced to pay for. That does make it about 35 points more expensive than a Leman Russ tank commander with a Damage cannon and triple heavy flamer. Another thing to mention is, whilst it has 6 more wounds than a Leman Russ, it doesn't have that sweet 2+ save that the Russ has. I know I've talked about this before and I can't overstate it. 2+ save plus armor contempt is really, really powerful. And whilst I like the Malcador, the fact it doesn't have that 2+ save, you are going to notice the difference. If you took one of these things and put it next to Leman Russ and ran them down the same flank on a battlefield, you're going to notice that your Malcador feels noticeably more flimsy than your Leman Russ. Yeah, it might have more wounds, but it's going to be taking those wounds a lot quicker and a lot sooner than the Leman Russ. So don't be fooled into thinking this is some sort of unstoppable, unkillable behemoth. It's not. It certainly will be taking wounds because it only has a 3+ save. And the last little point I just want to make is that the Malcador does have a fairly short range. I mean, at the end of the day, this thing is only moving 10 inches. It only has an 18-inch range, and it has no way of being able to take track guards in order to safeguard its movement value. That's right. The Malcador cannot take track guards. Unlike the Hellhound, where you can spend the 5 points and it doesn't matter if it's on 1 wound or if it's on 4 wounds, it's still going to be rocking at full capacity. The Malcador, when it starts getting degraded, and like we said, it's going to take those wounds because it's not got that 2+ save, it's going to start struggling to actually get into range of things. I mean, especially if you're getting it down to its bottom bracket, which is 1 to 4 wounds, it's only got a 4-inch movement. So it does have a short range, and it will suffer when it starts taking damage to bring its main gun to bear. But these are all, I would say, fairly small disadvantages. Overall, I'm very positive about the unit, and if I see one in a list, I don't think it's a meme unit. I think overall it's quite powerful. Is it my go-to unit? Not at the moment, but that's just because at the moment I'm kind of fixated on like tank commanders and artillery. But you could certainly include the Malcador in your list, and it wouldn't overly detract from what you're trying to do. I mean, at the end of the day, would I consider it a top tier A-list must-take unit in your guard army? No, probably not. That's still reserved for like tank commanders and stuff like that. But what I would say is I think there's no problem with you taking a Malcador, and you won't be hamstringing yourself anymore. It's a bit like Baneblades and stuff like that. Baneblades are now okay now. They're no longer the blowing your own foot off that they once were. You can include them in your list and they'll do perfectly fine and probably achieve the battlefield role that you've got in mind for them. So overall, I think the Malcador Infernus is going to get a thumbs up from me. It's a cool unit and you can feel comfortable including them in your list and not feel like you're weighing yourself down. And just to end on a bit of a positive note, the cool thing about the Malcador Infernus is that it is not a Titanic unit, it's actually just a straight up heavy support unit. Now the reason I quite like that is, unless you're running cage and you're going to be like lots of mortar bits, sometimes it can be tricky to pick that third heavy support option that you kind of want to take to fill out your brigade, and you could do a lot worse than taking a Malcador Infernus. Once you've got your sort of 2 full paired artillery, you could certainly take a Malcador Infernus. It would not be a bad third option at all. So, but yeah, that's just like a cool little micro buff that this unit has that makes it something interesting and unique and a bit more different to include in your army list. But that's all we've got time for today now. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please leave lots of likes and maybe even subscribe to the channel. And of course, I'd love to know what you think. Put it down in the comment section below. Do you like the Malcador Infernus? Do you not like it? Rule of cool, not rule of cool, tactical, all that kind of stuff. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Now, if you've really enjoyed today's content and you want to see more unit reviews and maybe even get access to the Mordian Glory Discord where you can discuss units like this with your fellow Guard players, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It's thanks to my channel members and my patrons that I'm now able to do this gig full time and bring even more content for you guys to enjoy. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you and do a shout out for our latest channel members. So a huge thank you to Lord Commissar, Mr. Smith's Government, Marshall, Wolfhunter 510, Steinkeys, Niall Meakin, Cosmic Drew, Antonio Aguilera and Vaxus, and Dominic Griffin. Thank you to all of you guys for becoming channel members. Thank you for doing your part. And of course, I also want to say thank you to my latest Patreon supporters as well. So a massive thank you, 07 down in the comment section, boys, for Goodwin Games, Museum Fremen, Dennis W, Faithless Gaming Inc, Gunlock Zero, Sam Lord, Leo Wilson, Eric Cruzat and Antonio Aguilera. Massive thank you to all of you guys for becoming channel Patreon supporters. It's absolutely amazing and I really appreciate all of the support that you guys have given me. Now last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, heartfelt, proper, genuine thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters, my War Masters. These are the people that have truly and utterly gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting the Mordian Glory channel, and I am eternally grateful to them. So a massive thank you, a serious thank you to Navy Veteran, Philip French, Ross Miller, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nicholas Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton and August Varney. I know I say it every time, but guys, thank you. You're very generous, just amazing, just quite humbling, mind-blowing support. It's just great. It makes a huge difference. It allows me to do this with a little bit less stress and be able to focus a little bit more on the content and trying to improve things that I put out. So massive thank you to all of you. It makes a huge difference. But I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.